This is me about to take a brief vacation. Unexpectedly ended up right above the Bermuda Triangle after weather forced us. Notorious for taking down so many planes and ships, the legendary myth seemed true. And my pilot now had no control. We were going down. Crash landing in the middle of the ocean, but somehow I survived. But that was just the beginning. I now had to survive 100 days, stranded deep in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. My name is Gyrocopter and welcome to this video. As I hopped on my life raft, made my way to my very first island named Homestead where I was set up base. Once I arrived on the beach, I nearly stepped on a sea urchin and then pulled my life raft ashore. I found a cool rock, but I was chased down by a piggy that apparently wanted the rock more than I did. Hehe, my rock now, can't catch me. Oh, my mute cow! Leave me alone, you stupid piece of bacon. I continued following the beginner's tutorial because I'm a noob at this game, and you can probably tell by my glowing red arm as I got my very first sunburn and went to look for shade. Oh, I need shade! Wait, there we go. And after cooling down, I took to the beach to slaughter some crabs. I made my first fire and killed some more crabs and made the kindling to start it.
Oh, look, men make fire.
A true survivor taking care of my hunger and thirst.
Put the lime in the coconut.
And after filling up my tummy, it was now time for me to work on a shelter. So I grabbed more plants, grabbed more sticks and made my first axe just as the sun was setting. Finally, I could start chopping down some trees and make some good progress. I also placed myself down a water stall to gather water overnight and then started on the foundations of my little shelter. Starting off with a little 2x2, I thought this would be plenty of room for now. By the next morning I had a fresh sip of water and I got ready to go to work. I know, right? Sometimes that 9 to 5 just never ends. I spent the rest of the day chopping down trees, collecting all the resources and finally had a roof over my head. Well, half a roof, so I could go exploring. I came across this very old shipwreck that contained all sorts of juicy loot that I dropped off at my base. I grabbed one of the lights and continued searching throughout the night all the shipwrecks around the island. Well, that is up until I nearly swam straight into a lionfish that could ultimately poison and kill me. So I knew I needed to call it a night for now. The next day I cleared out my inventory and I wanted to go search for some rocks. Just as I was about to go out, I spotted something strange. Hey little buddy, what's going on here? And if you don't know who that was, shame on you. That's the hero from Hero Wars, an online action-filled RPG where everyone can find a character to suit themselves. They have cyborgs, aliens, vampires, and furries that won't disappoint. I've been playing for about 2 weeks and I'm about to unlock Chubba, a literal tank that devours his enemies. But Celeste is the real S tier, switching between DPS dark form and a healer light form. And just look at her fresh new outfit. There is no equal to Hero Wars. I personally fell in love with the game over the last few weeks. Every month there is an event in the game. They just recently rolled out the new Titans. The one I like the most is Kyros, the Titan of Darkness. He looks freaking awesome. It's easy to start playing, but assembling the perfect team of heroes is an art in itself. For example, Mojo the Shaman can't heal Darkstar the Elf as effectively as the good Grandma Martha can, while the Snow Cleaver makes a great pair with the Swift Isaac. Hero Wars is a world of 6 unique modes and more than 1 million players. Play alone or see who is the top dog amongst your friends. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Here's a question for you. Where can you get 30,000 coins, 600 emeralds and 5 awesome heroes to start dominating in Hero Wars right away? Too slow. The answer is in the link in the description below. Play Hero Wars now. And while it downloads, let's get back to the video. As I pulled my raft into the water, I got ready to navigate to another location where I could get some more resources. So I paddled to the island that I could see across the water, and that's when I spotted a massive ship, as well as a little shark circling my little life raft, but he seemed quite friendly. Finally, I started grabbing all the rocks that I could find on the beach. Well, that's up until I came under attack yet again. This time it was a giant crab.
Oh, no. Take that. Why can't I get some rocks, man? There we go.
But clearly I had stayed too long and a massive storm was starting to form. I needed to get home and I needed to get home quickly. I was absolutely terrified of lightning, so I hopped in my raft and I started paddling back as quick as I could. And boy, were these some pretty big waves. I was definitely super worried that my raft would roll over or sink.
Oh, that was close. I thought I was gonna tip over there. Oh, home.
Finally I reached home, docked my little life raft and got back to farming. I now had rocks again, which meant I could replace my axe and continue chopping down all the trees. That evening I found some barrels that I took back to base so I could make a hobo fire pit the next day, and finally made my bed so I could rest up for the very first time in 3 days. The next morning I still didn't get the achievement of completing the shelter and I was pretty confused. That's when I realized I needed to build this stupid thing. And with the tutorial out the way I made my hobo fire pit and I then picked up my label maker and I named my very first friend Wilson, because I was definitely gonna get lonely for the next 100 days.
Alright, Wilson, you make this place homey now, okay?
I did some more organizing, dropping all my loot, and once the storm cleared I packed up my raft and I got ready to sail to yet another island to explore just what else is out there.
Yeah, you just keep swimming. Nobody needs to get hurt today.
Finally, I arrived, pulled the raft ashore and dropped off all my storage bins and went searching in all the shipwrecks for any nice juicy loot. I found an air tank, which meant I could go scuba diving and search longer for loot. And finally, by the end of the day, after grabbing whatever I could, I popped up and noticed the sun had already set, so it was time to go home. So I loaded up the life raft, hopped aboard, and that's when I got a bit worried my containers might fall off. You see, the ocean waves were getting a bit more rough and something else was lurking underneath.
Alright, I've just got this feeling I should rather grab these. Oh, what was that? Okay, I need to grab these things quickly. Quickly.
And it turns out my shark buddy from before was no longer as friendly, as in the night he thought I was an easy victim. But luckily I prevailed, made it back home, pulled my life raft ashore, dropped off all my loot, and I called it a night. Because the next morning, the farming really commenced. I really wanted to expand my base nicely. So I gathered up all I could, and that's when I learned you should never drink more than 2 coconuts.
What just happened? Oh, I'm still embarrassed. I'm gonna need a shovel to fix this.
But I continued working through the diarrhea, made some planks so I could make some shelves for all my storage, as well as furniture. I made a few more missing crates so I could fill in all the shelves, and then spend the rest of the night rearranging all my items in a less chaotic manner. The next morning I lit up the fire so I could start working on my breakfast, and decided it was a good day to go fishing for the first time, and boy was this fun. I even got to get revenge on the lionfish that scared me the first night. I had some technical difficulties since there was no prompt to place the fish, so the only logical conclusion was to drop them on the floor, skin them, grab all the meat, and boy was my character ungrateful.
Oh, gross.
But still there was no prompt, so I did the only other logical conclusion and dropped it on the grill, and I heard some sizzling. So of course I jumped right on top, emptied out my inventory of all the fish on top of the grill, and I was cooking up a storm. Quite literally, just look at the storm. My fish would never cook, but luckily it did, and finally my tummy was getting full. And what do we do with a full tummy? Why, we go to work, of course. I started constructing my very own balcony so I could really enjoy the sunsets and sunrises that this game has to offer. Speaking of sunrises, the next morning I hopped back on my raft and I was forced to go to yet another island. I was running out of rocks and I no longer had an axe. So I went to collect all the resources that the island had to offer, arranging them into crates so I could have more inventory space, and then searched all the surrounding shipwrecks for any more crates or good loot. Finally I was ready to make my way back home, and just as I got on the ocean a storm started, but luckily it wasn't too bad. I made it safely back home, dragged my raft ashore, and went to drop off my loot for organizing, but my table was not sturdy enough. And remember I said I was a noob, I didn't know you could simply drag it upright. So I made a new table, a lot more sturdy one, and continued chopping down trees. Everything on my island that I could turn into sticks, and finally finished the roof of my balcony. Finally I could relax and enjoy a nice sunrise the next morning. But there's no relaxing in this game, oh no, I was off on another adventure. As I arrived on yet another island, I was actually hoping to find a pig so I could get some leather, but I quickly got distracted by all the shipwrecks. So I went searching for all the loot that they had to offer. Noticed I nearly became shark meal yet again, but it didn't faze me as I continued searching around for all the loot that the shipwrecks had. going around and collecting as I went, and by that afternoon I had all the loot that I could possibly carry, made my way back home, saw my shark friend and finally arrived, dropped off all my loot and put them into additional shelves, and once things were organized I came up with a plan for the next day. I wanted to start to work on my very own boat. I mean, the little raft could just not carry all the loot that I wanted. But hey, we first gotta fill up that tummy. As I killed the gigantic fish, lit up my hobo stove, I finally figured out the dragging option. And boy did I have fun with it.
Hey, no more half-cooked, half-raw steaks for me.
And after filling up my tummy, you know exactly what we do next. Well, we go farming. So I searched around for more buoy balls, and once I found a second pile, gathered them up and added to my raft. Now the true science: if I added a platform, can I add shelves to it? Well, I guess we'll find out the next day. So the morning of day 10 I sailed to another island and searched all the shipwrecks to find any loot as well as hopefully ship parts, which included tires, barrels or buoys. But that's when things took a turn for the worse. I had just stepped on a sea urchin and I was now officially poisoned. Why is that bad? See, the antidote requires this thing called a PP plant, and if you don't know where to find this, have it, or at least know what it looks like, your chances of surviving are very slim. And in Stranded Deep, if you're playing alone, there is no respawning. If you die, you die. So I rushed back to my home, hoping that somehow, somewhere I had picked it up and not realized it. I checked through all my storage but came out empty, so I continued assembling my raft, as this would be a lot quicker to travel and use less stamina. There was no time for resting, I couldn't even sleep, I just needed to keep searching. Another island came out empty, and then things got worse. I had just fallen off my raft and it was sailing away. My stamina was out and there was no way of catching it. But by the grace of God, the raft got caught on a rock edge and I was able to get back on. To make matters worse, I got bitten by a shark and I was now down to a slither. I tried to hop up in a moment of panic and finally was on the raft. Things were not looking good. I now needed to sail to one more island and hope there would be a plant. And there I saw it, the PP plant I was searching for. Finally I could make the antidote, and with just a grain of health left, I managed to rescue myself, but I still needed water, so I carefully climbed some trees, grabbed some coconuts and made sure not to drink more than 2 this time. The next morning after my near-death experience, I thought I was gonna go check out that big ship. I mean, for some reason my health was just not regenerating. And with death at any corner, nearly stepping on a sea urchin again, I knew I wanted to check it out before I possibly went down. So I filled up my raft with a bunch of empty crates, and finally the next morning I went to check it out, a possible way back home. But oh no, this big ship has been beached for years. Luckily it had some barrels so I could expand on my raft and block off a crab trying to attack me. I summoned up the courage to go check out what exactly had happened to this massive ship. What tore it apart? As I made my way upstairs, things finally took a turn for the better. And my hope arrived. A plane. An old rust bucket, but it was still intact. This could definitely be a potential way I could escape the Pacific. So I had a quick damage report to see what was needed, and then continued to survey the area when I found these Gyrocopter parts.
What? Imagine you can fly around in one of these, that's awesome.
And being the total daredevil that I am, I walked up to the edge, summoned up the courage and I leaped off. Luckily it was deep enough and I survived. I hopped back on my raft, sailed to yet another island. I was filled with hope. Hope that I might just survive and escape this wretched place. As I dragged my raft ashore, I spotted a small little hut and went over to investigate. Was there more people here? Was I not the only one? But I was in trouble. As a crab squared off with me, I remembered I had a slither of health. Well, that's when a snake bit me.
Oh, tell me you're not serious.
And I ended up being poisoned yet again. The search was back on for another PP plant. Luckily, this island had one, and I could practically immediately cure myself. I decided the water would be safer for now as I went to grab more ship parts in the hope that I could expand my raft before sailing off. The next morning I continued expanding with whatever resources I could find, going from one ship to another, adding more pieces to the ship, but I was unable to sail as a massive storm drew in, so I decided I would wait it out. Added myself a canopy roof and I noticed my health was still going down, so I started sailing home. But all the expansions to the raft made it super hard to control. For some reason my steering was not working and I was forced to dock at another island. I decided to make a quick shelter, dropped it down and went to sleep in the hope that my health would somehow regenerate overnight. But waking up the morning I had no such luck and I was thirsty yet again. So I enjoyed my 2 refreshing coconuts and then dragged my raft closer ashore as I spotted some shipwrecks. I went in and that's when I spotted some clay, a very rare yet valuable resource. Valuable enough to farm even with a sea snake. I then grabbed some more barrels in the hope that this would level up my raft, and it did. I changed my rudder as well as sail position and finally I had regained control and I was able to navigate my raft and successfully sail home yet again. Now I just needed a quick drink of water. But since I was gone for so many days, my water was empty, so I started up the fire, started cooking some fish and catching even more. Well, that's up until another shark nibbled on my butt and nearly ended my life. That was seriously a close call.
Oh dang, I thought I was a goner.
So I harvested my catch of the day, drank some more water and continued farming up some fibrous leaves to keep the fires going. I cooked up the remaining fish and by that afternoon enjoyed it, had a quick sip of water and finally my health was regenerating. I then used my clay to make a fuel stall so I could add an engine to my raft. By that afternoon my health was halfway full, but that's also when a piggy came along to ruin my day.
I can't fight you now, I can't fight you now, I'm so low on health. Oh man, this is the end of me. Oh, why was he so determined to kill me?
Yeah, that's what you get, little piggy, for taking on the mighty Kruger ops. And with a mighty hero being victorious, I went to cook up my piggy and slaughter any other threats on the island. I finally made my tanning rack and I was also able to make a bow and arrow so I could go after any of the snakes that were still left on the island.
I see you. Oh, that's a head. Nope, oh, that's miss. Oh, it's coming for me. Get away from me. Oh, this is harder than it looks, man. There we go. All right, fine, it stood still.
Yeah, let's not talk about my bad aim. But finally, the threats were taken care of. The next morning, I continued making some more leather so I could make myself some water skins and carry these with my travels. I knew at some stage I would need to move from my island because resources were running scarce. And that's when I spotted a pretty decent sized island that might just be ideal for getting me kitted out. So I packed myself up a little travel bag, waited for the storm to pass and making sure I had everything I would need, and added the engine by that evening. I now just needed some fuel. The next morning I caught some fish so I could have some snacks for the road. I cooked them all up and then made sure that I was fully stocked up and filled of all my needs before setting sail on the new adventure. As I traveled to the very first custom mod island, Hightide Fortress. Once I arrived, I spotted some strange looking shacks and thought maybe there was still life here. As I docked on the beach, the welcoming party was not very nice. I got bitten not once but twice. Hey, that kinda rhymed. I then spotted some potatoes nearby and knew there was nothing to fear. Once I take care of all my hissing friends with the help of a spear, I would be able to go search around in the hope that I would find a pee-pee plant near. Alright, I'm done with rhyming now. Let's get down to business. This island came with a ton of goodies. A massive shipwreck that had everything I would need to expand my raft. But I also got curious as to what had happened to the local inhabitants.
What happened, buddy? Snakes got to you? You don't need this, do you?
I then continued farming up all the barrels and adding them to my raft. There were more than enough. Everything I would need to get a decent sized raft going. The raft got so big that I had to chop down trees just to make enough space to get it properly beached. The next morning I got ready to go search some of the rusted old outposts in the hope to find either life or some good loot. After searching 3 of the outposts, I had gotten so much loot that I had to chop up all the old containers so I could use the planks of them and add some more shelves onto my raft.
Yeah, I see you there, stupid.
Knowing it's not safe at night, I went to have a quick nap. Found some clay the next morning, and I also found out that you could break your bones in this game. So after making a splint and healing myself up, I told myself to get good at parkour, and that's when I finally made the jump. After searching through the final outpost I could find on the ground, I managed to track down a cave, slaughtered another one of my hissing friends and claimed my bricks as the reward. I then continued searching around, high and low, for any possible method to get to the higher outpost, especially since I saw lights at them. Was there still life out there? The next morning I continued my search. I went up to any form of a high point that I could find in the hope to get a view of how to navigate to the top sections, but nothing proved promising. I continued searching around, all over the island, even climbing some trees to try and get a better view, but there was just no way up. I would need to make another plan, and that's when I remembered about my Gyrocopter parts. So I dragged my raft, got pulled away by a shark that dragged me into the ocean, but luckily I escaped.
Oh man, he got me good. I think I'm actually bleeding. Oh, that was a bit terrifying. Yeah, I'm bleeding.
So I fixed the direction of my raft and got ready to release the sail, and that's when I spotted a plane flying overhead. Was that even a thing in this game? Had I just missed my chance of being rescued? Feeling heartbroken that I missed my chance, I hopped on the rudder and started sailing. Realized I was still bleeding pretty badly, so I made a bandage and luckily didn't fly off. I healed myself up and continued searching for my home. I did get a little bit turned around and I forgot to bring a compass, so I had no idea where I was going. But finally I spotted my little island ahead. As I arrived back home, I couldn't help but think there was more out there, so I knew it was time to set course to a different location. But first up, we need to make some crop pots so we could plant our potatoes and hopefully start making our very own biofuel. Now, growing potatoes would be a timely process, so I thought to spend the time productively and I started loading up my raft with everything that was valuable from my campsite. I chopped down all the containers I wouldn't need, used the planks to make more shelves and continued carrying all my containers onto the raft. By that evening, I had pretty much cleared out the entire place. I had a quick look on my potatoes, but nothing yet. So the next morning I continued chopping down all the containers to do some more expanding on the backside of the raft and make space for even more shelves. I also added an anchor to the raft.
How long do you take?
Caught myself some fish to make sure I keep myself well nourished while I do some farming. I wanted to take my life raft with since it was sentimental to me, but boy did that cause issues.
Whoa! What the hell just happened?
I kept checking on my potatoes as well as in the evening. By the morning it was finally grown and I could start producing my biofuel as I added the mash to the fuel stall and lit it on fire.
This makes no sense. Come on, cook faster.
I wanted to add one more section to the raft while I waited for the fuel to cook, so I made my way back to Hightide Forest to grab all the tires that I didn't grab on the first run, added it to the front of the raft, and once I was done I made my way back. I sailed throughout the evening and by the early AMs I decided to shoot off a flare in the hope that any passing aircrafts would find me here before I leave this location. But all that ended up finding me was a stupid pig and I now had a new problem. So I ran inside, seeking shelter like a proper coward. And once I manned up, I got ready to take care of the little piggy with my spear. Taking it down, and at least now I had some food for the road. Not just that, my first biofuel was ready, so I continued collecting it throughout the evening and I knew now I could finally set sail in the morning. The morning I filled up my motor, hopped on it and I started sailing away, saying goodbye to Homestead.
Goodbye, little crappy island with limited resources and a lot of threats.
Ah, tough love. As I continued searching the horizon, I finally arrived at a new potential home, Selva, another modded map. And hopefully my new home, well, the clay I sailed over definitely indicated yes. I ran around that entire day, searching around for potential threats, making sure this place would be safe to inhabit, since it did have plentiful resources. By that evening, I had not seen a single threat. This place seemed amazing. Not just that, it had its very own PP plan, so I knew I would be safe here. So the next day I would start farming and enjoy this tree chopping montage. After causing some mass deforestation, I got ready to go to bed. The next morning I started turning all my palm trees into wooden planks. That way I could use that for crafting all the foundations needed. So I crafted what I could carry, and once my inventory was full, I made multiple trips to go and drop it off. Working through all sorts of sunburns, I was determined to have a roof over my head by the next day. By that evening I had finished up chopping up all the trees into planks and I was ready to start building. But it did get a little bit dark, so I went to take a quick little nap yet again. The next morning I started off by placing myself all my wooden crop pots. This way I could get my potatoes growing since they took ages. Once that was done, I started making a little wooden deck. This way I could use this for farming as well as cooking. The ideal little crafting area. And what better crafting station than the brick furnace as well as the brick station, since I wanted a proper home this time. So I turned all my clay into the building bricks of my house, but despite running out of time, I knew this would be my final night, sleeping underneath the stars. So the construction on my house commenced, brick foundations and all, and boy were these things looking amazing. But I quickly ran out and had to search around for the clay blocks that I saw when I sailed in. Not just that, there were some washed up bricks under the ocean. So I continued expanding the foundation as well as adding myself some access stairs. I added a small wall so I wouldn't fall off, and I saw I was super thirsty. It was probably time I needed to add some water stalls. I also added some lighting.
Oh no, no one saw that.
Finally I finished dropping the lighting, dropped down my bed and took a brief nap. The next morning I continued farming up all the clay I could possibly find. I managed to get some of the walls placed but quickly ran out of bricks again. I went to catch myself some dinner and by that evening cooked it up. The next morning I grabbed all the engine parts and gyrocopter parts as I was really interested to see what this thing looked like. And boy, could I not wait to try it out. But before I allowed myself to, I wanted a new fuel stall. But unfortunately I had used up all the clay, so I went searching around and found this cave, and boy was this clay heaven. I grabbed all the remaining clay that was here, as well as some free bricks. This was just enough for the fuel stall, the walls, as well as the roof to my glorious little bachelor pad. The next morning I finished up the balcony roof, and after finishing the construction I looked on proudly at what I had made. It was a good day. I even had potatoes and could start working on fuel, which meant I allowed myself to fly the gyrocopter, and this thing was amazing. It was so small and nimble, but that's when I spotted something, another ship off in the distance. So I quickly went to land, grabbed my flare gun and shot off around. Had a quick look in the hope that I would see movement. There had to be someone still on board. So I had a quick drink of water and filled up my tummy and got a nice evening's rest. And the next morning I sailed to the ship, known as Starlight, a container ship that's been lost at sea, and spotted another life raft from my plane. Was this from the captain? Was he on this ship? As I dropped anchor, I got ready to go investigate. As I swam around looking for my entrance point, I found a massive hole in the side of the ship and got in just in time as a shark swam past. So I started investigating below the decks where it was still flooded, going around through all the rooms of the ship, grabbing all the loot that I could. I had reached the engine rooms and searched through, and this place has been flooded for quite some time. Finally I found the captain's quarters, but there was no sign of life at all. So I continued collecting loot until my inventory was full. So I returned to my raft, and by the next morning I was hard back at work, searching for loot. Well, that's up until I spotted that my raft was sailing away, even though it was anchored. So I hopped in the ocean and literally landed on a shark, but I think they got as scared as I did because they swam away and I could safely make it back, sail myself closer and drop the anchor right against the ship. I spent the rest of the day collecting buoy balls and any other valued loot that I could find. Finally, when the inventory was full, I made it back to the raft, but I nearly swam into 2 tiger sharks that were camping the exit. Luckily, I made it safely aboard, and I spent the rest of the evening going through all my loot and making some rearrangements and sorting things out. The next morning I was back on the container section searching through the last remains of the ship, but disappointingly they were all empty, so I collected some more buoy balls, contemplating grabbing the one that went overboard, but with those 2 sharks you never know. But to my surprise they were gone. I had no idea what had scared them off, but I wasn't gonna wait around to try and find out. So I started sailing away, got caught up in a storm and spotted a whale. And let's just say curiosity got the better of me. Well, that's up until this big boy turned around.
Hey buddy, you friendly? I don't want to be like Jonah. Oh no, that's terrifying. I'm getting out of here.
I tried my best sailing home, but the storm made me drift all over. I was losing direction, losing where I needed to go, and getting all turned around. By that afternoon, the storm had finally cleared, and using the ship as my reference point, I tried to make my way back. But that's when I spotted something off in the distance. Something big was floating a surface. So of course, curious little me sailed closer to investigate. And unknowingly, I was about to sail to my first boss fight. My friend had been eaten by nothing other than a megalodon, and I was now in serious trouble. I needed to get the hell out of here before this thing started attacking me. I was not prepared for this. Finally, by the evening, I made it home. The next morning I immediately got to work to making some more fuel. Knowing that giant whale-killing megalodon was out there sent shivers down my spine, so I knew I needed to arm up. I needed to get ready to take it down. By that afternoon I caught myself some dinner and prepared it, continued making some fuel, ate my dinner, and I got well rested for the next day of farming. With all my current resources I could only make 18 spears, and that was definitely not gonna cut it. So I spent the rest of the day gathering up all the fibrous leaves that I could, turning them into rope, and by that afternoon turned them all into spears. But 40 spears still didn't feel enough, so I had a quick drink and I continued searching, and that's when I spotted some random group of dead people, and they had a ton of loot with them. I even heard a little piggy nearby that led me to some bricks as well as a machete, and of course we had to test out the sharpness. The next day I was practically ready. I went searching around for some fruit so I could make gauze, but that's when I spotted a mystery box that turned out to be completely useless. More dead people as well as more spears. I finished up crafting the remaining spear gun ammo that I could. Some crude spears and then turned them into refined spears. Finally, I was feeling as ready as I could. I was stocked up on ammo. I stocked up on fuel, making sure that I wouldn't run out, and by that evening grabbed all my water bottles and I was ready to go. I loaded up my raft with all my goodies and went to get a good night's rest for the fight that lied ahead. The next morning I cooked myself a ton of fish to fill my tummy but also have some food for the road. Had a quick scan at my vitals and saw I was ready. So I hopped on my raft and I started sailing. Finally I reached the location, so I switched off the engine, grabbed all my ammunition and slowly sailed closer, feeling my nerves build up as I spotted the Meg. I quickly dropped anchor and I got ready to start the fight.
Steady, there you go, that's a hit. Oh, it barely does any damage.
I was definitely worried after my first shot, and then the megalodon leaped out of the water and nearly grabbed me.
Come on, get closer, there we go. Another hit, nice. Boom. Oh shit! Get out. Okay, I'm safe.
I finally got into a good rhythm when I saw the megalodon do 180s every time you shoot him, so I simply had to time running from one side to the other, and finally I could deal some real damage.
Oh wow, I still have half left. Oh, seriously? Come here, you idiot. Now I'm just gonna fight you in the water. Where are you? Boom!
And with that, the megalodon was dead. I also noticed that I got my first trophy as well as an aircraft part. So this means I need to slay 2 more bosses in order to escape this island.
Wilson, come look at this. I'm the Shark Slayer.
The next morning I went out to harvest some potatoes and filled up my fuel stores, gathered up some more fibrous leaves to keep all my fire stoked, stepped in a sea urchin, but luckily I still had antidotes. The next day I grabbed some more fuel and finally felt I had enough to play around with a gyrocopter a bit. I felt that my beach felt a little bit empty, so I came up with a plan that day. I was gonna make a sign. So I farmed up wood for the entire day, but it got a bit too dark to see. The next day I got myself some breakfast, cooked up my fish and continued farming up trees for the entire day. By that afternoon I grabbed some more potatoes to continue my biofuel production since I was planning a trip. I wanted to go explore with a gyrocopter as I felt I would cover more ground than with the raft. But I know that thing is hell of expensive on fuel, so I continued farming it. I spent the entire next day farming up fibrous leaf.
Stay up.
Just so I'd have a bit of a buffer of stock and finally went to rest up. The next day I had a quick breakfast and went to finish up my sign. Finally it was all done and I checked it out using the gyrocopter and it looked awesome. I went in for a landing and decided I would fill up my fuel stalls one more time before heading out on my little adventure. I nearly had to hide from a sunburn all day and finally by the evening had a quick drink of water, placed some lights on my sign and went to check it out yet again. The next morning I was as ready as I was gonna be, so I started packing up all my fuel cans. I grabbed my 2 survival packs that I had prepared and finally I was ready to go. The plan was simple: scout out potential new locations, look for any potential boss fights, and go to the ship to see exactly how much fuel and rations I would need, collecting any goodies along the way that I could possibly find, especially scrap since my island didn't have any.
Leave me alone.
Just as I was ready to take off, the crab managed to pinch me, but I was off and off to the next island, collecting all the scrap that it had to offer.
Come on, quickly, not again. Nice. Not today, crab.
But shortly after escaping the island, a storm drew in and I had to refill, so I took shelter again at another island. I popped off a flare so I could go farming in the night and hopefully not get bitten by snakes. I grabbed everything I needed and made a little shelter so I could sleep through the storm. The next morning I continued my flight. I started second guessing my judgment and thought I was gonna run out of fuel before reaching it, but luckily I had just about made it on top and was able to land with a slither of fuel left. I immediately hopped out with the plane's pedals and went to repair the cockpit. Once that was done, I quickly dropped a piece of fuel and noticed I would just need one more. This was awesome. The water was super easy to complete, just 2 of my flasks and it was done. But the rations were a big problem. I would need 10 of them and that's just something I didn't have now. I refilled the gyrocopter and decided to spend the night at my old island, just to experience a little bit of nostalgia on where it all began.
Oh yes, still no trees. This place still sucks. I don't know why I built here.
The next morning I made my way back to Hightide Fortress to search the upper sections of the island that I couldn't look at before, in the hope to find any signs of life. But all that there was loot. This place had been abandoned. As I got ready to fly to the next tower, I ended up clipping the gyrocopter and it went down. I was super worried that I jumped after. A big mistake because I ended up breaking my bones. Luckily I managed to get it safely back on top of the bridge, but that's when I spotted more loot. At this point I had a bit too much to carry already, so I decided to chop down all the ones I could empty out, and once they were few enough for me to carry, I was on the way. So I slowly creeped back to the gyrocopter and went to land at the bottom of the beach. That way I could quickly make myself a splint and heal up my bones. By that evening I was off to the second tower. Just as I went in for a landing, I made the same mistake and it fell into the water. So I quickly rushed to search through the entire place, and once it was done, dove down. Fortunately it was still intact, and just as I dragged it back I nearly became tiger shark meal, but luckily survived. So I left it overnight to dry out, and the next day I was off. I didn't have enough fuel for the trip back home, so I knew I had to search for another pretty big island. That's when I arrived at Smugglers Curse, and I spotted what seemed to be the very same plane that I arrived in. Was this really the same plane? Was my captain still alive? So I went in to land the gyrocopter and investigate the crash site, but the plane looked like it's been here for years, even though we barely crashed 50 days ago. I made my way on board to search for any sign of life, but there was none in sight. And that's when I spotted the corpse of the captain. Where the hell am I? This isn't normal. I added a few drops of petrol, but this wouldn't be enough to get those blades spinning. Talking about spinning, I spotted this spinning shark, so I decided to take advantage and kill him for my first meal on the new island. Once I slayed him, I grabbed the meat and I went to investigate. What was on shore? Was there still life here? Well, no life, but there was a ton of bricks. Not just that, there was a shed that was filled with scrap metal and parts to make a new raft. So that's when I came up with a plan. Instead of risking a flight with limited fuel, I would scavenge the island and collect all the ship parts that I could find, also grabbing any nice juicy loot along the way. As I was going through it, I got attacked by a crab, which I swiftly taken care of, but shortly after got bitten by a snake, and this was definitely not the most friendly island. I decided to rather construct a temporary shelter and sleep through the storm. The next morning I took care of the snake, but I also decided today I would choose violence. I wasn't gonna end up like the dead people on the island, so I went to take care of any threats that I could possibly find. Once the island was safe, I continued constructing my raft, finishing up the platform, dropping down the sail as well as the anchor, and then making some shelves so I could carry back all the loot that I would find. And boy was there a lot here. I then hopped on the gyrocopter to fly back to the raft, but that's when something caught my eye. There was an indentation in the mountain edge. Not just that, it was the entire ship. So of course I had to investigate. Who the hell were these people? Why did they stay here, and how the hell did they get a ship in the mountain? But to be honest, I didn't want the answer to these questions because this place was creepy. So I quickly wanted to grab all the loot that I could and get the hell out of here. This place was massive. It seemed like it was just going deeper and deeper. I continued searching throughout the entire shipwreck. I couldn't help but shake the creepy feeling that I was being watched.
Like waiting for the jump scare. Hello? Is there anyone here?
I finally got to the back end of the ship, and that's when I spotted a second set of gyrocopter parts. Someone must have left this there. So I quickly grabbed all my loot and I was ready to get the hell out of here.
This is the last room. Buddy, you sat on the can a bit too long.
Once I reached the top, it was already daytime. It was time for me to get off this island. So I opened up my sail and hopped on the rudder. I was a lot less worried about the gyrocopter, seeing that I had a second set now. But I was still cautious. I knew one hit from a shark or a bad storm would send it flying.
Go on, get, stupid.
And just as the sun was about to set, I finally spotted my island on the horizon. And I continued to set course.
Oh, am I happy to see you. I didn't think I would make this.
By that evening I finally reached, and the lights from my help sign helped me navigate safely to the port, so I docked my raft and landed my gyrocopter safely. The next day I was more determined than ever to get the hell off this place. I quickly constructed a helipad on top of my raft for the gyrocopter. The next day I caught some food to fill up my tummy and spent the rest of the day working on some more biofuel, not to get caught in the same situation. I then spent all my bricks that I had gathered from the previous island to do some base expansions. Even though I was determined to get the hell off here, I still wanted to make my stay as comfy as possible. So I enjoyed a refreshing drink and some fish in the morning before spending the rest of the day collecting as much sticks as possible. I made sure to continuously farm my fuel, collecting as much rope and sticks as I could, and by the next morning I was ready to craft my spears. So I packed my fuel, packed my water canteens as well as rations, and I got a good night's rest. I probably had one more day of preparation left. So the next day I started my day right by catching fish and cooking it up, added some anchors and brought the gyrocopter safely to the raft, and finally grabbed one more batch of fuel, loaded up the stove and loaded up the fire so they could cook and make one more batch of fuel overnight. By the next morning I filled up my tummy, grabbed the fuel that was ready, dragged my raft into the open waters, hopped on and opened the sail. But the very first storm sent my gyrocopter flying off. Luckily, with some quick reactions, I pulled up the sail, dropped the anchor, I quickly hopped in the water and managed to save it, throwing it back onto the raft and jumping after.
Alright, now you stay on here, you stupid.
The storm finally calmed and I continued searching around, and finally by that evening I reached it, but the sun was setting, so I thought to drop anchor, and the next morning I sailed closer. The great Abaia, a giant eel waiting in the bottom of a shipwreck.
Oh, there it is. Boop. Got him.
But the water was so dark and the eel managed to grab me and caused me to bleed, so I needed to grab a bandage to stop the bleeding. This was definitely terrifying. I needed to keep an eye out. I needed to make sure that this thing doesn't come out of the depths and grab me and kill me, but boy was he adamant. Had to stop the bleed even a second time.
Come on, come closer. Boom! Not today, not today. Come here, you oversized worm. Oh no, you got me again.
After he nearly drowned me, I managed to escape with a slither of health, and I hopped on the raft to heal up a bit. I went in for another fight. I had barely gotten this thing down to half health. It was definitely a terrifying fight. The thunderstorm was definitely not helping, but finally I had a good momentum.
This is gonna be the end of me. Come on, let me go.
I barely escaped with a half a bar of health left, so I quickly healed up and continued the fight because he was also feeling it. And finally I gave the final shots needed and he went down. Another trophy and plane part in the bag. All my spears fell to the ground, but luckily I was able to grab them before hopping back on the raft still in a massive storm. So I sailed to a nearby island, but this was no ordinary island. As I dropped anchor, I went to sleep before exploring the next day. I had to fly up to get to the top. This place was massive. As I saw a little shack in the center, I went exploring. And boy did it have some nice loot. After grabbing everything that there was, doing multiple trips, taking it back to my raft and organizing it, I went back the next day, farming up some clay, farming up a little shed, and that's when I saw something strange. Someone had just fired a flare gun.
Hello?
Hello?
Is there someone
Is someone there?
Yes, there's someone.
I need help.
I'm coming, buddy. Just stay put.
I'm just down
Oh my
here in
gosh,
the cave.
There's seriously someone down there. What is that?
As I had no idea how to get down, I quickly went up to check out the light. It was a ton of spears and I also found some more clay. I then made my way back into the house and that's when I found a secret trap door. Was this the way down? Was I hallucinating or was there seriously someone here?
What the hell? Hey, buddy. I see you.
I noticed I was at the bottom of the well and the stranger went into the water, so I followed after. I swam into a door and then a blockage of sticks that I quickly had to break through. My oxygen was running out, but luckily I prevailed, and on my last breath I made it out. I continued up the path and saw a massive ship, but no sight of the stranger.
Look, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, but I
Wait,
gotta
what the
do
hell?
this.
What the hell? No! Are you serious?
I'm sorry, man.
You can't leave me down here. Toss a rope, something, please. I'll die down here.
You don't understand. I need to save my baby girl. I'm coming, Megan. Hold on.
And not long after, I heard the sound of my gyrocopter flying overhead. It had officially been stolen, and there was a shark in the water, so I quickly needed to get the hell out of here. I searched around the ship for any possible loot that I could find, waiting until the morning before I could search around for a possible exit route. The next morning I spotted a massive cliff that seemed farmable, and after seeing there was no other way, I hoped and prayed that I could break the rocks, and lo and behold I could. Finally some daylight. As I hopped in the water, I rushed back to my raft, nearly swimming into a hammerhead shark, but luckily making it past and making it safely back. But that's when I noticed a lot of my crates were missing.
Still can't believe it. Wait. No, don't tell me. Oh no, he took my fuel and my rations. Are you serious?
After learning I had been robbed from even more things, I was now really panicking. Was the plane even still there? So I rushed over as quick as I could. I barely had enough fuel just to make it there, but I didn't care. I needed to know. I had a little bit of a boo-boo, but luckily some quick reactions. Dropping my anchor, I managed to get back onto the raft and continue pushing forward. But I was running on fumes. In a matter of no time, my engine ran out. And that's when I had to continue sailing. A storm was brewing in as well. But finally the ship was in my sight. I got as close as I could, went into dock and rushed over. My heart was beating in my chest. Was my only chance of surviving just stolen from underneath my feet? As I made it up the hallway, I luckily saw the plane was still there. Everything intact, exactly as how I left it. The next morning I dropped off the rations I found in the shipwreck, as well as another engine part. I was another step closer to escaping, so I pulled my raft back into the water and continued sailing. Throughout all the storms, the evening skies, and by the next morning my island was in sight and I was able to dock. I then spent the rest of the day sorting things out back at my island, starting up the fuel and filling up all the fires, and decided I would relax for a few days before starting the final push. So the next morning I took all my clay and turned them into bricks as I wanted to make another little building. I started doing the foundation and the stairs, added some half walls as I wanted to have a nice view. By that afternoon I started up my dinner and then finished up the roof for the little building that I was constructing, and it was coming together nicely. I enjoyed my dinner before heading off to bed and calling it a night. The next day I finished up the roof, placed myself some wall hooks and hung up the 2 trophies that I had gotten so far, now just 1 to go. I then also placed myself a little dinner table even though I was alone. I spent the next day working on the lighting while doing some farming in the background, and boy did this place come out amazing. I then constructed 1 more foundation because I wanted to make a little fishing platform as I had some big plans for the special next day. Of course we'll have to do day 69 in style. As I finished the roof, dropped down a stove, I went to grab Wilson, but he didn't look quite Wilson enough. There we go, that's much better. Then dropped Wilson on the chair and we did some fishing together.
Wilson, I'll catch us some dinner. You wait and see. Wilson, I told you. You didn't believe in me. Look at the fishy, Wilson.
But of course I had to catch Wilson one of his own, and that evening we enjoyed our dinner together.
How is it good?
Now clearly I have been alone way too long. So I spent the next 4 days gathering as much fibrous leaves and turning it into rope, averaging about 24 days. After 4 days I had 2 full piles, and next up was sticks. I spent another 2 days working on all the sticks that I could, constructing my stick piles and collecting as I went. And by the next day my stick and rope piles were complete and I was ready to start turning them into spear gun ammo. I made about 100 in total, and this would be plentiful for the final boss that lied ahead. Of course also plenty of bandages and filling my tummy that night. The next day I started working on fuel. I would still need 5 rations, which meant I was gonna need to scout around on the Gyrocopter going from one small island to another, so I was gonna need a lot of fuel. I finally had about 7 jerry cans filled up and loaded them onto the ship, constructing my second Gyrocopter since my first got stolen, and finally taking it onto my raft. I was about as ready as can be. So the next day I started sailing towards the final boss location. Seeing a ton of wrecked ships on the way there, I knew this wasn't gonna be easy, and that's when I spotted the buoy, but it was getting dark, so I decided to drop anchor and fly closer to check it out, trying to get a brief aerial view of the final boss, Lusca the Great. Gigantic octopus lurking beneath the ocean surface. After not being able to see anything, I went in to land and decided I would wait out the night to start the fight the next morning. So I picked up anchor and I sailed closer. So I grabbed all my arrows and grabbed all my spears. Finally I was getting close, so I had a quick sip of my breath boost and I hopped into the water, and there it was, as I got ready to take the first shot on Lusca.
Man, I'm not ready for this. Oh, that thing is so terrifying. Come on, stop moving. Hold still. Oh, what the hell? It can grab me. Fire, fire, fire. Oh, it got me again. Seriously? Twice?
This fight was no joke, being grabbed twice already, and a third time shortly after. I knew I was in for a ride, so I quickly took a bandage and went to the surface, hopping on the buoy and deciding to switch to spears, but I got pulled in again. They were definitely doing a lot more damage, but I now had to get away from Lusca again.
Let me go, you stupid octopus.
And coming back to the surface, I saw Lusca knock my buoy over, so now it was time for revenge. So I unleashed my spear gun ammo but got grabbed again. Lusca wasn't playing around, I needed to grab my remaining spears.
Boop. Oh, right in the eye. That had to hurt. Oh, you angry now, aren't you?
But I ran out of spears and had to finish with my spear gun. Lusca was getting so mad and tried to grab me twice in a row. I was in serious damage, but so was she. I saw that she was about to go down, so I opened fire in the hope that I could get her before she gets me.
Boom! Finally. Oh, that was so stressful. Oh. Wait, I don't get my achievement? Why don't I get my achievement screen? I feel robbed.
And as the sun was setting, I sailed to a nearby island, the Shipwreck Island, in the hope that I would find rations here. I quickly constructed a nearby shelter so I could go to bed and start searching the next morning. 5 rations to go and I could get out of here. So I hopped into the water and started searching all the shipwrecks, finding another ration and now had 4 to go. So I decided to head back to my island one final time, arriving on shore and dragging the raft, quickly filling my water before going to bed. And the next day hanging my final boss trophy. I had slain all the beasts, and it was now time to pack up everything that I needed, and then went to call it a night. The next day I turned my sign into a different word. I no longer needed help. I thought to turn it into free, in the hope that anyone that would get stuck here in the future would have fun with the starter base with everything that they would need. And the next day I was off, searching around from one small island to another for any possible rations that I could find. Finally I had it all, and it was time to say goodbye.
Come on, Wilson. It's time for us to go home.
But of course not before filling my tummy first, as I cooked one final dinner and spent the last night possibly in my house forever. And the next day I was ready, saying goodbye to the island that had brought me so far, saying goodbye to the island where it all began, and then making my way to the final ship. This was finally my chance to go back home. As I waited around for midnight to get that final 100-day achievement, I saw the notification pop up. I had survived 100 days in the Bermuda Triangle, but it was time to get the hell out of here, and I just hoped that this rust bucket would somehow stay in the air. As I turned around, got ready to launch, and I was off. Fingers crossed that this thing could fly.
Oh, please go up. Oh, we're up. We're up. We're flying, baby.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next guest for writing the award-winning book Surviving 100 Days in the Bermuda Triangle. Kruger Ups, it's an honor to have you. Kruger, I have to ask, after surviving the whole ordeal, is there anything that still scares you? I see you walk around with an axe.
I'm still terrified of flying.
I can imagine.
My first one's actually tomorrow.
You'll be just fine, man. Let's give him another round of applause.
Oh, I can't believe I'm on another one of these things. Stupid book tour. What? What the hell? No. Tell me this is just turbulence. No, not again. Brace for impact, everyone. Oh, my head hurts. What the hell? Who are you?
You should have never come back here.
I recognize you. You're the guy that stole my Gyrocopter. Leave that boy! If you made it up to this point, thank you so much, and thanks again to Hero Wars for sponsoring this video. Download it and start playing right now. And while you're at it, here's some more videos that you can check out. I'll see you again soon.